No, we don't.
When we have bombs
Are you kidding me? How many civilians you think have died in Afghanistan and Iraq from our supposed surgical strikes?
Because war isn't perfect, unfortunately.
That's
we can't
right.
just kill the bad guys. That's why it's war and it's bad.
It shouldn't be in either one of them.
But I'm saying, Afghanistan shouldn't be in?
No.
Why? Al-Qaeda are the people...
No, excuse me. We went to war with Al-Qaeda because they supposedly would not turn over bin Laden. That's all they did. Al-Qaeda, that's all they did. We said to Al-Qaeda, turn over bin Laden. Al-Qaeda said no, and that's why we're fighting them.
Well, the Taliban, you mean?
Yeah, or the Taliban.
The
Excuse me, the Taliban.
They were the head muckety-mucks lopping off heads and doing whatever they do. But don't you think that somebody had to be held responsible? And I know some of your theories on 9/11.
They're not theories; they're questions. And in our country, you're not allowed to ask them anymore.
You have theories, though.
No, I have questions. I have questions. That's all. Not theories. I have questions.
Your take on what happened is not what the official line is.
Right.
You feel...
I follow what Thomas Jefferson said. Dissension's the greatest form of patriotism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
so I dissent. I question my government.
I agree with everyone's right to do that. Absolutely.
But why does everyone get angry when you question 9/11? People get angry at you and they call you names. And they do all this stuff. And all I do, there's things about 9/11 that are very peculiar to me.
That whole day was a bit peculiar.
Yeah. And I do have a background, I think, in demolition. I was trained by the best guys we have in the country. And when I look at those buildings and I see how the cement was pulverized to powder, what type of energy could cause not a simple fall?
Well, that wasn't
not a simple fall. Yeah, they said one floor pancaked into the other and down they went.
A lot of weight.
Well, how would that pulverize 900 tons of cement into dust?
People are questioning, I think, because you do have the demolition background, the Navy SEAL background. How come it was like on September 12th or 13th? Like, you kind of came out a couple of years later. And I think that's what people are questioning. Like, there have been so many theories about it before.
Because at the time I was governor, I didn't have time to question it. When you're governor, that's a full-time job, believe me. And so it was after I got, question 9/11? Here's what did it. After I office and Bush said we're going to invade Iraq. I stepped back and went, Iraq? Wait a minute, the 19 guys they told us that did this, there wasn't one Iraqi.
Right.
So why are we going into Iraq? And that's when I started to question. I said, ooh, what's the real big picture?
But how did that make you change your view of the physical?
What's the real big picture here?
But you could question that, but it doesn't have to necessarily tie into 9/11. It could tie into Saddam Hussein tried to kill my daddy. That's pretty much what I think.
The point is, all of it wouldn't have happened without 9/11.
That was the catalyst because he was able to use the fear of terrorism and potential threat of Saddam Hussein, which turned out to be bullshit.
To lie to us.
I'm not gonna disagree.
Right.
That was the weapons, big lie, lie. But
well, if they'd lie about that, wouldn't they lie about other things?
Just because I lie to one thing doesn't mean I'm lying about a murder. I could lie that I stole something. It doesn't necessarily mean I would lie for something more important.
All right, let's go back to my generation. I'm a Vietnam vet. Now, I remember when the President Johnson got on TV and told us our boys are floating in the water for the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which is what got us into the Vietnam War, where 58,000 of my generation were killed, probably 1 million Vietnamese killed, who knows how many. And they've now come out and said that wasn't true. It never happened. Now, if they would fraudulently build up the Gulf of Tonkin incident to get us to war, you think they wouldn't fraudulently take us to war again?
In that fashion, I'm not too sure about that.
Really?
In the fashion of taking down two huge, very symbolic buildings, killing a lot of innocent American people, in that fashion, no. And the demolition thing, I like to, because you say you're in demolition.
I was trained by the best.
You know what it takes to wire a building that size for demolition.
Not much.
How would you do that in a working building?
Easy.
When you see,
let me explain.
When I see them demolish buildings, they're drilling holes, they're planting, there's wires, cables.
Great. First of all, The World Trade Center had construction going on a daily basis. Every time a tenant moved out, they had to redo whatever floor they were on. And I learned this from guys that worked there. He said construction was an everyday thing. Construction workers would walk in and out all the time. You want to know how to do it? Be the UPS man. Show up with your brown truck. You got access to every floor. You can carry boxes up to any floor. Who's going to ever question? You're the UPS guy.
Enough explosives covertly to take down two buildings that are 100 stories tall.
Do you know anything about the modern demolition?
I've seen many.
Do you know what super thermite is? Do you know what super thermite is?
No, but I assume it would be a very high temperature.
It's a highly explosive demolition that you can put on like painting the walls. It doesn't become a demo till it dries, and it can be made into paint. You could have people painting super thermite right here in the building, and they wouldn't even know it.
I would love to see a demonstration of it used to take down pillars of cement.
I can show you super
without
thermite.
Drilling into the superstructure.
I can show you super thermite. We just did it for a pilot I'm doing on True Channel. We showed super thermite simply painted onto I-beam steel and detonated, and it burned right through it. I-beam steel.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a question? I would almost, you're a conspiracy theorist. Why?
Well, the government's just a theory.
Let me just ask you, like, they just. To go through all that and go through the planes, why wouldn't they just bring the buildings down, take 2 trucks, however they do it, get them into the basement? If you can bypass the security at the airport, if you can do all that, you can get trucks into the basement. You somehow exclamation that Saddam Hussein has said he is going to attack a major New York City. That day, you drop both buildings. You A, kill a lot more people. You B, remove almost all of the X factors that can fuck you up, like a plane not taking off because of mechanical failure. Mm-hmm. And you give the entire American public a galvanizing reason to go into Iraq. Like, that is so much simpler and so much easier to control. Why wouldn't they? I mean, if they
I don't know.
Why not something simple? Why 4 airplanes and possibly more, and then you leave Zacharias Moussaoui to be tried? It's embarrassing.
You know, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and that's my point. Why is it that when you ask questions about 9/11, you're immediately attacked? Why aren't you allowed to ask a question about it? If you saw something that you don't understand, which there are many things I don't understand that day, why June 1st? Did George Bush do an executive order changing how we respond to air attacks? Up until that point, base commanders were left to their discretion whether we sent jets up, and that happened like 170 times a year. Jets would go up in the air. Yet June 1st, through an executive order, no jets were allowed to go in the air unless it was cleared through Donald Rumsfeld at the DOD. So in essence, you could have a stand down simply by Rumsfeld not answering his phone because no one had permission to go up in the air. Where was our air defense that day? Here you had 4 commercial hijacked airplanes covering 2 to 3, 4 hours a time, and we didn't have one jet in the air. Yet, go back, Payne Stewart, the golfer.
Yeah.
Stewart took off from Florida in a private plane. They went up and lost contact. Within 20 minutes, they had a fighter jet up on the wing. He said, they're slumped over. I can't raise them. They appear to be dead. He followed them to Nebraska or whatever. When they didn't hit Omaha, he let them go down. Well, this was a private plane out of Florida. And we had a jet up there within 20 minutes. Here you've got 4 hijacked planes and not one. Let's look at the government's theory, and I call theirs a theory too. They've never proven any of this.
But you're saying 4. Hold on, you're saying 4 planes. Not to interrupt you, but you're saying 4 planes. You remember too? They were up, and it was very, very quick. Like when the one plane went up, the bunch of stuff happened. A lot of people, the air traffic control wasn't exactly sure what was happening.
Yeah,
and the next thing you know, it's flying into a plane.
Because Iraq